Hello, everyone. It's just such a pleasure to see this room really full of people. You know, it's always a bit of a mystery how many people show up, but I think this really proves that we were right when we thought that this is a very important topic, and it interests not only cities, public authorities, but also various institutions that work with cities. When I spoke with cities a few years ago, with some cities a few years ago, I would often hear, we'll talk about what needs to happen so that you can accelerate climate action, and even if there are not enough subsidies, I would often hear, we need the money. We need the money to come from the government or from the EU, and there is nothing else we can do because this is our reality. And then I would say, like, okay, but the reality is, like Julia explained, that this will not be possible. So what then? What's your contingency plan? And we would often hear, like, you know, we don't really have this contingency plan because we need the government or we need the EU to find us the money if we are to reach climate and energy targets. And their opinion was very often that they are not heard, that they are too small, that they are not important enough, that no one actually listens to them. And even if they go have consultations with ministries or participate in some conferences, nothing much comes out of it. And to me, that was maybe not disheartening, but quite sad to see that there is still so much to do to improve the way those various levels of organizations work together and really understand each other and try to find solutions that actually work in reality and not only on paper. So what we managed to do, and what was really important for us to do under Prospect, was not only to focus on capacity building, even though it was our major and most important part of the project, but also we wanted to understand the reality on the local level and then share these findings with those institutions that might find them useful. It doesn't mean that this would change policies from one day to another, but it might be something that people also on the individual level in our everyday work would find inspiring or interesting, useful, and then when they actually work on whatever they do in their organizations, they will remember their needs better. So we run those consultations, and we will share with you results of those consultations probably next week, because we are still getting more input. Now, we wanted to understand if cities, public authorities, municipal energy agencies have used innovative financing instruments, broadly understood, and if yes, what made them do that? If not, what made them not to? What they need, what they suggest, what their recommendations are, but also if they are afraid or they are negatively, those are negatively perceived, what can we do to change it? So we asked some questions about which instruments are actually used, and you can see, like, looking at the bottom, and I'm looking at one of our panelists, Ryan, who will probably not be very happy to see that, but green bonds are still basically not used across Europe in most countries. For different reasons that we will discuss during the panel. Guarantee funds are also something quite new that most of our respondents didn't know anything about. Crowdfunding, I would say disappointingly, because there is a lot of potential, but still hasn't been used a lot. And that is a great way to mobilize capital, being a little bit less dependent on subsidies and less dependent on, let's say, working with the classical approach to private finance. We also have in the panel representatives of such projects who can share a little bit about that. Third-party financing, so basically loans, the more standard loans from banks are still most popular, but also you can see that not everyone has used it. Not every local authority, especially the smaller ones, they might not have had to use it or not decided to use it. There is growing interest in energy cooperatives, blending, so like Julia said, basically looking at different ways to combine different sources of funding and financing, and growing interest in the ESCO model, energy performance contracting, but this is also really interesting interesting because there are still many barriers depending on where you live and depending on the country. And here we are going into the barriers on the local level and how cities across Europe still do not have the same opportunities, which is also an interesting, maybe a bit frustrating outcome of our mentoring programs, because then it would also show up, and I guess Vlasta will be able to tell us more, that some cities in some countries, some local authorities in some countries can benefit from EPC model amazingly well, and for some it's absolutely a no-go yet. So there is a lot that needs to change. And what made them look towards something else than subsidies? Most of all, they didn't have the money, so they had to look anywhere. It was the funding gap. They just looked for wherever they could get the money from. But also, interestingly, it was not only the money gap, but also the capacity improvement that they felt within their team. They learned more, and they were more confident about trying to use these instruments. I think it's really important. The QR code takes you to more information about these results and also some additional possibilities to contribute. Increased knowledge and capacity proves what Julia said at the beginning and what Andre also talked about in his opening remarks, that there is a lot of still need to bring cities together, not only to bring them to talk, but actually to have them cooperate and jointly approach those barriers. And as you can see, they received support to do it through different means, either advisory services, advisory support, maybe grants, where they could use advisors paid from some grants, but also exchanges with other cities where they just felt they learned more. And I think this slide is the longest, but also the most interesting one, because we wanted to understand quite deeply, in depth, what the opinion is about innovative financing instruments. And as you can see, there is some potential, but there are a lot of fears and concerns. Public authorities need more incentives, whether it's regulatory incentives, policy incentives on national level or the EU level. They feel that, especially for instruments they have not used yet, and where there are not enough examples in their countries, successful examples they could replicate, they would need to have some security in terms of, for example, national advisory programs, etc. I think it's also a very interesting point that we often focus here, especially in Brussels, on talking about the city level and the EU level. And then the most tricky part is to address the national level, which often is the main immediate barrier that cities face, cities, public authorities in general. And that is something disheartening for some representatives of public authorities. The processes are perceived too long, too complicated. PPP seems to be, for many respondents, quite long and risky in terms of transparency, in terms of ending up having legal problems if you have to prove that you have chosen your private partners in a transparent and correct way. And because of that, they need more advisory support, and they need more capacity. And they need the regulations in their countries, and which is connected also with the EU regulations, to be adapted. This is just a summary where we try to group what I said before, so I will not go through it, but these are the main trends. Lack of expertise and resources shows up as the most important one, but also the legal and regulatory adaptation, which for cities is also the most difficult to tackle. And personally, from talking to so many city representatives, I sometimes think that they don't believe something can change. And that's for organizations like ours, where we try to help cities, and for the Commission, for organizations working with cities, to hear that cities don't believe something can change because they've had such bad experience, that is frustrating and also much motivating, I would say, because there is so much room for improvement. But there is interest, yes. Most respondents were interested and were aware that they need to start looking away from subsidies, but only if they would have some more support. And many also were already doing it, or maybe they have tried, maybe they implemented a pilot, maybe an easier, simpler way of an ESCO model, for example, maybe doing blending, maybe having a research grant to test new solutions. So they have tried and they are interested in learning a bit more. And here I wanted to refer to what I said at the beginning about how cities don't believe that their voice is heard. At the same time, we got a lot of fantastic feedback that they see these type of exchanges as really important, even if they don't produce immediate policy changes. Because just coming together, getting to know people who struggle the same, but maybe they struggled and overcome some struggles. We've had great examples of some of our mentors who had to work in the context of not adapted policy regulations in their countries yet, and they found a way, you know? So it was not easy. It was not exactly the type of project that they planned, but they found a way, and then they shared that with their partners, their mentees. So there is a lot of hope. And I really like what we got from one of our community of practice members, that being able to exchange is useful for the content, but even if that doesn't work, it's still important for the human, personal touch, and it brings energy and it motivates. And I hope that this is also something that we can dig deeper during our panel discussions. If you want to learn more about the consultations, you will get everything because you're on our mailing list. But if you want to still learn more, do visit our website. We have still a section about policy dialogue, and we still can, for let's say until the end of the week, accept a few more answers to our policy survey, which we can add to the final version. Thank you very much.